Hello and welcome to this Substance Designer tutorial. In this video, we're going to close out our material. We're going to finish this complex material by creating an input so that we can add a custom height. One thing that is really missing is that we have this tread plate shape, and this is just embedded here into our metal floor. And it would be much better in terms of reusability if we could allow the user to supply their own height map so they can get a completely different shape. So I'm going to right click this metal floor and I'm going to choose to open a reference. And so that's going to load a copy here of this substance, or it's actually going to load the SBS file here into the Explorer. And so this just kind of shows another reason why being able to create base materials like this as their own graphs, it just makes it a lot easier to go back and make changes to our substances instead of trying to, change everything in one huge graph. So like I was saying, sure enough, we have this shape node here, and it's just kind of embedded right here into this graph. And what I'd like to do is add a custom input. Well, I can do that here by just adding an input node. So I'll hit the space bar, and here towards the bottom we have input color and input grayscale. Now since I want this to be height, I'm going to choose input grayscale. Now for my identifier, I'm just going to call this height. And actually, I'm just going to leave the usage blank. It doesn't need to be height. I'm just going to leave it blank so I can just really put any type of grayscale input into this. And for the label, I'm going to just type in input height. Okay, so now I have a situation here where I would like to I'd like to switch between my input and my shape. Or we'll say this is the default shape here. For this particular parameter, so here I've double clicked to get to the root level of the graph, I'm just going to create a Boolean button that's basically going to say, yes, I want to use the input, or no, I don't. So here we'll click the plus button, and for the identifier, we'll call this custom underscore height. And for the type, we want to set this to Boolean, and default we'll say false, so that we can just use this default shape. Here for the label, I'm going to call this use custom height. All right, so now we have this control and it's just a Boolean, and I'd like to switch between these two guys. Now, a real simple way to do it in this case is just to use the actual switch node. So I'll hit the space bar, and if I start to type in switch, you'll see that we have switch and switch grayscale. Let's use switch grayscale. So we'll plug this guy up. So we'll move this node into place, and you can see that it has an input 1, which is true, and an input 2, which is false. So this is our input height. Let's plug this into the true, and let's take our default shape and plug it into the false. And then let's take the output of the switch and just plug that right here into our levels. So here's what we have. Let's go back to our use custom height. So like I said, we want to use this as our Boolean value. Now I could have just came over here to this node and then just simply exposed this parameter, but I had already created the parameter myself, so I didn't do that. Now, a way to just simply kind of remap this is if I click my graph button, you'll see that, well, it does recognize that I do have a Boolean value here, and I could just use this. And then it just links that parameter I created on my root graph with this instance parameter here. So that's all we have to do. If we go back here, so double click to get to my root level, and have custom height, so false, we're seeing our default shape, and if we hit true, we're going to see the input. So now we have our metal floor, and we have this nice input here. So if I select the node, you can see that here we have this use custom height, and it's set to false. Well, since it's set to false, what I'd like to do is have this input here not be visible, because if I don't want to use a custom height, then I don't really need to see the input. So let's jump back over to our metal floor, and we can use our visible if to help us with this. So let's see, if we go to our use custom height, this is our Boolean value. This is what's controlling the switch here between the inputs. So this is the identifier. This is what I want to target, so I'm going to copy this. So now I'm going to go back to the input height node itself, and here we also have a visible if. This is true for inputs and outputs, so we can enable and disable our inputs and our substance outputs based on an input parameter. So here we're going to use the same syntax. We know we need input, left bracket, open double quotes. Let's paste in that custom height identifier, close quotes, right bracket, and then we want this to be visible. So we're going to use equal equal for equality, and we want this to be visible only if our custom height is enabled or true. All right, so now we can just jump back over to our metal floor Rusty, and here is our node as its instance in this new graph, and our input for our height is gone. So if we enable this guy, now we can see that our input appears and we don't see a shape here. So let's just make a new shape. So here I'm going to do, let's just do that weave 1 again. So weave 1, I'll just tile it a little bit, and let's input this as our height. And since we created our metal floor as our base material and we are driving everything from that height input, you can see that as soon as we put in a new shape or height, and we get a completely different material with very little effort. All we have to do is just enable a new height map. So for now, what I'm going to do is just take this weave here. We'll just get rid of this, height, and we'll just set our use custom height back to false here. Now, this is a parameter that I would like to use globally on the root level of my graph when I instance this metal floor Rusty into another graph. So I'm going to expose this as well. So we'll come over here to our graph option here, and we'll just choose expose. Now here I'm going to give this a name. I can just use custom height because I already had given this a custom identifier name when I exposed it in the substance itself. So I know custom height is going to work for me. So I'll click OK. We expose this out to our root graph. So now let's double click and take a look at our input parameters. And what I like to do here at the very end is just click this preview button, and I can see everything that I have here. So we've got our metal color, we've got rust amount, we've got a dirt amount, we got rust effects roughness control, and then we've got this use custom height input control as well. Now, I think there's one more thing I'd like to add here to this metal floor. So let's jump back to this guy since we already have it open. So in this section here is where we're either going to work with our default shape or we're going to work here with our custom height. We do have a tiling control here on this first shape, but for our custom height, we don't really have any tiling. So I think what I'd like to do is right before I feed this here into my level, so I'm just going to just left click and drag to select my connection line here. I'm going to hit my space bar, and I'm going to use a node here called the Save Transform, and since I'm in grayscale, I want to use grayscale. So with that connection line already selected, and I create the node, it inserts it right here between that connection line. This gives me a nice parameter for setting tiling. So if I just left click and drag, you can see that I can tile this here. And so what I'm going to do is just expose this tile. So we'll click our function button here and we'll choose expose. And this guy here, I'm just going to make a new parameter. So I'll call this height underscore tile. All right, so here's our tile, height tile. We'll call this height underscore, no, this is our label. So we'll call this height tile amount. And so we've got, default and minimum is 1, and it goes up to 16. That sounds good to me. All right, so another tile control here for this metal floor. This is our base material. We can save this guy, and let's just jump back to our main graph. We're going to go back to our metal floor, and let's expose this control as well. So we'll expose, and I'm going to set this here to height tile and click OK. So now we'll double click and let's take a look at our parameters once more. I'm just going to reorder this height tile amount. So I'm just going to left click and just drag this right above my rust effects roughness. So if I just preview, let's take a look at my controls. So here I can see I've got my rust amount, a dirt amount, a height tile amount, and then I have my Boolean controls here at the bottom. Another thing that you can do with these input parameters is you can actually group them. So right now I have a height tile amount, but I also have this use custom height button as well. So maybe I want to group these two guys together. So what I could do here is just come over to this height tile amount, and in this group section here, I'm just going to call this height controls, and I'll copy this because I'm going to use it again. So here for my label, instead of just keep reusing the name height, I'll just call this tile amount now. And let's jump over here to my custom height, and for the group, paste in that height controls, and then I'm going to have use custom, well, maybe we'll just call it use custom map. So now let's take a look at our preview controls. You can see that we now have height controls here. So if I click this drop down here, you can see that it grouped my tiling amount and my custom amount. And I think I'd also like to go ahead and just group my rust effects roughness and that rust amount. So let's do that as well. So for this rust amount, for the group, we'll call this rust controls. And in this case, for the label, I'll now just call that amount. And I have this roughness amount. Just for clarity, I'm just going to drag it right underneath my rust controls. And for that, I'm sorry, actually I mean to drag this rust effects roughness boolean control. So let's just drag that guy up. And here in our group, we'll just paste this in. Well, it was height before, so let's just call this rust controls. All right, let's preview this one more time and see what we have. Well, it looks like I've made a little mistake here. Let's see what I have. Rust effects. I just have an extra space in here. No problem. We can fix that pretty quick. So we'll just move that there, and we'll do a preview. So now we have our rust controls with our two rust controls in it. Here we have our height controls, and then we also have this dirt amount slider as well. So just to make it even cleaner, I'm going to take this dirt amount and just put it right here. So it's going to be, right underneath my metal color. So we'll preview one more. Metal color, dirt amount, rust controls, and height controls. So everything's nice and grouped together. Okay, so here I've just created a new substance package, and I'm just going to take a look at my substance as I instance it into a new graph. So now I'll grab my metal floor rusty, and I drag this in. I've got this single node here, and I can take a look at what my controls are going to look like. So I can set this over here to say custom. Now I have a custom control. Here I just want to view this in my 3D view, so I'm just going to right click and just drag and drop this in since I'm not really worrying about any outputs right now. So I've got my custom color control. I've got this dirt amount, so I can just increase this a little bit. Here I have my rust controls. So I want to have my rust affect my roughness. Actually, I'm going to disable that. So now I can set a custom roughness, and I'm going to just move my rust controls down just a little. Well, here, let's do this. We'll keep it something like, say, this. And then here I have my height controls. So I can actually choose to tile that default map if I would like. So here we'll just set it to 2. Or if I like, I can use a custom input map. So here we'll enable our use custom map. So now I see I've got a problem here. Even though I've enabled this use custom map, I don't see this input. So it's always good to go and test your substances like this. So this is an easy fix. Let's jump back here to that metal floor rusty. So the way I have it right now on this this metal floor is that it's actually hiding my input. And so, I don't think I actually want to do that because I want to do the hiding on this main graph where I'm compiling together, my base metal and this rust. So this is where I want this to actually show up because this node is designed to be the complex material that is going to be instanced. So what I'm going to do is, again, just jump back to my metal floor here. And I'm just going to double click to get here to my input parameters. And for this custom height here, I'm just going to get rid of... Let's see, where do I have that? Oh, I'm sorry, it's actually on the input here. So I'm going to come over to my visible if, and I'm just going to get rid of this guy. All right, so we want that input to be visible to us because this is a base material that we're going to use to create complex materials. So let's just go back here to our metal floor. And so here we do get this input. So now I'm going to create an input for this guy. So input grayscale, and I'll plug this in. Now, even though it's plugged in, it's not getting used again because the use custom height boolean value is set to false. So we're going to take this guy here, and his input, I'll just call this custom underscore height, just same as before. I've already got one in here. So let's do custom underscore, it's getting in the way, height, and I'll just do it like this. All right, so again, just as I did before, leave the usage set to blank. All right, so now we've got this guy, and double click to go out to my root level, and for my, let's see here, where do I have my height controls here? Use custom map, custom height. So we're going to copy this input because we're going to use our visible if on this input node. So here the mistake I made is, like I said, I put this visible if here within this node, but you actually want to do that when you're going to hide your inputs and outputs. You want to make sure you do that on your, I guess the rootmost level of your graph. And so that's what I'm doing now. So we'll go back to this guy, and for the visible if, we'll just do our input, paste in, and again, just equals true. All right, so that is going to take care of it for us. So now we'll save. It's always good to create yourself just a quick graph that you can instance your so that you can just instance your node in and just make sure everything's working. So we'll drag and drop this guy in. So we'll go back to this node. Use custom map is enabled. If I disable it, it's going to use that default map. Our input goes away if we enable it. So now we're going to use a custom input, and let's just grab one. Again, make sure we test. So we plug this guy into here. So this is what we get. Now remember here, underneath our tile amount, we can actually tile this guy as well. So our tiling, we built that here into our node. So we don't need to like add another node here to do the tiling. So there's one last thing that I want to fix here on this substance. And if I take a look at this rusty metal floor, I've got my material, but then it looks like my height output has been left behind basically. So I'm going to hit 1 on the keyboard to expand my channels, and you can see that all of my channels are grouped except for my height. Well, that's an easy fix itself. I just need to set the height to be grouped as well. So let's jump back over here to our main metal floor rusty. This is our complex material. And here we'll just come over to height, and sure enough, our group is just blank. So you'll notice that all of our outputs, since we want to group them as a material, they all are using the same name for the group. In this particular case, it just happens to be material. So I'm just going to copy this, come over to our height output, and paste that here into the group. So that's going to fix that issue. Let's go check it just one more time. And now you can see our material output is set correctly. 1 on the keyboard. All of the channels are grouped.